feel at home in a place like this. I had a bookstore at one point for a very short period of my life, and it's one of the places where I feel most at home. And also it's a place where I feel we can have a deeper conversation than you normally associate with politics. Because this is where you come to have deep conversations when you read a book. And there's far too little of that going on in American politics, and for all kinds of reasons that we will be discussing here this evening, that is very bad news. I think that Americans do go deep, as much as anyone else does, about our own lives. We're very good at analysis of our own selves. We're very psychologically astute. I think any two people here right now who don't even know each other could agree to go to dinner later in the evening, and within 30 minutes it would be very clear who was in therapy, who had trauma, who had traumatic toxic relationships, who really needed to practice more self-care and had to really set a boundary when it came to abuse. That goes without saying. But when it comes to our collective conversations, particularly political, we have been trained to think like sixth graders. We've been trained to go dumb. We've been trained to just farm out our better thinking like, oh, somebody's handling that. Yeah, they sure were. And so I don't think we can take back our democracy until we first take back our power in our heads and in our hearts. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to have this collective conversation with you. I do think that as we are moving forward in American civilization, the various sectors of our society are seeing a regeneration, a regreening, and specifically seeing that we are now well into the 21st century. And the mindset of the 21st century is different than the mindset of the 20th. Just like the mindset of the 20th was different than the mindset of the 19th. The mindset of the 20th was very much a product of Newtonian physics. The world is a machine, very rationalistic, mechanistic. The world is a machine. If you don't like what's happening in the machine, you just tweak pieces of the machine. But as a British physicist named James Jeans has said, well, it turns out the world is not one big machine, it's one big thought. And so the 21st century's mindset is very different, far more holistic, far more whole person. And I think, by the way, that that has a lot to say about our Gen Z generation, because Gen Z is not 20th century people. Most of them were not even born in the 20th century, and those of them who were, they were just babies for a while. And so they have a much more easy time thinking, holistically thinking in terms of whole person. That's just more the temperament that dominates there. And one of the things that you hear a lot is that they don't see why they should live their lives at the effect of bad ideas left over from the 20th century. And on that, I could not agree more. So I think we need to rethink our society. Everything begins with a thought in terms of consciousness. And when I said before that I think that America is regreening itself in many areas, what I mean by that is more whole person thinking, a more holistic thinking, places where we recognize you can't just look at symptoms, you have to look at root causes. In so many sectors of our society, people are getting that, but they don't get it in politics. And that has made a lot of us go, I don't even want anything to do with it, it's so toxic, who wants to even be there? We're just going to go ahead and try to make the world a better place. And we have come to understand, I think, critical mass understands, certainly in the last few years, that if you have your most forward-thinking people leave politics behind, who's going to be left there? Except some more regressive thinkers. And we're now at the point, I don't think it's that people are apathetic, I don't think it's that people don't care. I think Americans just can't even believe what's happened. I think people are just stunned. And I think when you have something happen in your life that might not be so good, you go, wait a minute, I gotta think about this. And that's where I feel people are, like, we gotta think about this. And one of the things that I experienced, having run for president this time, but also running last time, I can tell you this, it is a deep conviction of mine, the American people are not the problem. We're not better than anyone else, but we're not worse either. We have the same decency, we have the same nobility, if that is called forth. The American people are not the problem. And this is where the crisis of our democracy lies. The American people are not the problem, but the will of the American people and the consciousness of the American people is actually being stymied by the very thing that should be the conduit for its expression. And that is the current political system. So the current political system actually acts like a lid on it, holding down the fullest expression of the American people, even holding down that which would speak to the safety and well-being and security of the American people, if it does not serve the short-term profit maximization goals of the donor class, which is in fact holding the government in its grip. All of which is to say, we really have a problem, and I'm glad we're discussing it this evening. How do we think things through? Well, how do you think it through in your own life? Well, one of the processes involved in any kind of individuation, you go to therapy or whatever your process is, and you start learning about your parents. You start learning about the history of your family, the history of your people. We know there's a lot of that right now, a lot of attention, a lot of focus on whether it's your race or your religion or your sex, your sexuality, all of which is very important. But it's also true that we need to come out of our silos right now if we're going to have the deepest American conversation. I don't care if you're black or white or male or female or something else. I don't care what your sex, sexuality, religion, ethnicity. After the hyphen, there's the word American. And I'm not speaking to this group or that group. I'm speaking to a place in all of us. I don't care if you're 18 or you're 80. I want to talk to you. And that, because if we're the adults here, that's what matters right now. We can't keep ourselves so separate that it's only about my people and ever hope to get past this separation that is literally pulling us apart. The place where we're most separated is in our own minds. And some of the people who most decry the separation are keeping ourselves separate. You see just as much smug, self-righteous, arrogant stuff on the left as on the right. So we all need to get over ourselves and become more emotionally and psychologically as well as intellectually mature if we're going to have the conversation out of which we will save our democracy. So when we do that, I believe that one of the good places to start is at the beginning. And so I'd like to revisit 1776. Now, the Declaration of Independence is our North Star. It's our vision statement. It's our mission. It's our everything. And John Adams said he hoped that we would revisit the first principles of the Declaration every July 4th. If those principles are just inscribed on marble walls somewhere, if they're written on parchment and put underneath glass in Washington, and we send our 8th graders to see it, if that's all it is and it's not inscribed on our hearts, then it loses its life force. Every generation, it is said in the Jewish religion that every generation must rediscover God for itself. And I think every generation of Americans has to rediscover the Declaration of Independence for ourselves. We have to ask, what does it mean to us in our time? You know, Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative, because the high-minded values in each side of the political spectrum, little on display today, but holding the ideal is that you also conserve those things which are eternally true. And the Declaration of Independence are ideals that are eternally true. When we do not hold them in our hearts, when we haven't embraced their meaning for us, like I said, they lose their life force. And when they lose their life force, we become easy to play. And that's what's happened in the last 50 years. We have been played. So let's think this through. 1776, 56 very brave men signed the Declaration of Independence. And I say they were brave because if, in fact, the British had won the war, they would have all been executed. They would have all been killed as traitors, and they knew that. Now, by signing that document, they imbued a new nation with ideals more spiritually as well as politically enlightened and advanced than any that had ever formed the foundational principles of a nation. Those ideas would change the world. Those ideas would open up a space of human possibility that had never existed before. The very idea that everybody should have a chance to soar. What are those principles? Number one, all men created equal. Radical in 1776, radical today. Number two, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, which I think in today's terms would mean everybody should have a right to self-actualize. Do whatever you want to do. Have a great time as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. Be whatever you want to be, do whatever you want to do. Number 3, governments are instituted to secure those rights. Not to undercut those rights, not to thwart those rights, not to diminish those rights, instituted to secure those rights. And number 4, the most radical of all. If the government's not doing that, if the government's not doing that job thus described, it is the right of the people to alter it or to abolish it. Now, you can apply that to any issue in terms of United States domestic as well as international policy today, and there's your answer. Now, that's where it started. It's also where it got gnarly, as we know. Because out of the 56 signers, 41 of them were slave owners. Now that's the American story. We're both and. We've always been both and. We were both and then, we've been both and in every generation, and we are both and now. We have always been this dichotomy, this almost bipolar aspect of the American mind. We are both the best that humanity's ever offered. We have been and are at times the worst that humanity has to offer. Get it? That's who we are. That struggle defines us. And it has defined us in every generation. Some more dramatically than others. Between these two forces, one force is the American who is in awe of the profundity of these ideals. Really gets what a big deal this is. Gets it on 2 levels. The rights that it gives to us, and also the responsibility that we have to hold those rights, to protect them from any assault, and to expand them in our time and in our way. Now, on the other hand, although there have been people in every generation who were willing to struggle, to sacrifice, and in some cases, to die for those freedoms, there have also been in every generation, some more dramatically than others, but from the very beginning, those who, for their own ideological and or financial purposes, had no intention whatsoever of seeing all these beautiful ideals you guys have got actually actualized. Not if it messed with their property rights. And with every generation, like I said, some more dramatically than others, that has been played out. But if you look at American history and you ask, well, how'd they do? They did pretty damn well, thank you. Yes, there was slavery, and then a generation rose up. There was abolition, and there was the Civil War. There was institutionalized suppression of women, and a generation rose up with the women's suffragist movement and the passage of the 19th Amendment. There was the first Gilded Age and the inherent financial economic inequities of that. And a generation rose up with the establishment of the original organized labor movement. And then there was the institutionalized suppression of black people, segregation in the American South, and a generation rose up with the civil rights movement, desegregation of the American South, the civil rights movement, and the Voting Rights Act. I've been running for president for the last year because it's our turn now. But today, it's not a specific institution. It's not like a specific institutional reality. It's not an operable tumor. It's more like a cancer that has metastasized. It's not a thing, it's an idea. It's an economic paradigm. It's the very idea that for some reason, short-term profits for huge corporate entities should come before your safety, your health, your well-being. That's just the way it is. That their bottom line has become America's new bottom line. And when that is the case, that means that that bottom line has replaced democracy. So that we are no longer, as Abraham Lincoln said, standing on the battlefield at Gettysburg, referring to the men who had died for the North, said that they had given their last full measure of devotion, that a government of the people, and by the people, and for the people, would not perish from the earth. Ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else, it's perishing now. It's perishing on our watch. We are not functionally a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. There are people in those countries who they call Abraham Lincoln a socialist. Of the people, by the people, for the people has been replaced by of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. We now have a matrix of corporate powers. There are overlords. They're no different than the landed gentry that we repudiated in 1776, and we need to repudiate them again. They are the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the big food companies, the big agricultural companies, the big chemical companies, the gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors. And over and over and over, our elected representatives, that's the whole point of this thing, that our elected representatives are our representatives. They are supposed to be representing our will, they are supposed to be representing our well-being, our safety, and our security. And over and over and over again, what they represent, much more than the will of their constituents or the well-being of their constituents, is the short-term profit goals of their donors, because they know that that has more to do with whether or not they will get reelected than how you feel at any given time. Because you and I have gone to sleep, and those corporate lobbyists never go to sleep. You and I have thought, oh, I'll show up every 2 years. I'll tell them what I think. I'll show up every 4 years. I'll do my civic duty. Those corporate lobbyists are in these people's offices every hour of every working day. Not to mention drinks after. So what we've got on our hands now, especially since the Citizens United decision 14 years ago, is that those corporate powers have unlimited permission to influence Washington. And Washington itself has become a system of legalized bribery. Now, I used to think, before I ran for president, well, those political parties, man, they are just chopping wood and carrying water for huge corporate forces. It's so much worse than that. They are huge corporate forces. They're simply part of that corporate matrix. And so they don't just protect corporate interests, they are a corporate interest. And they act in the same way that any of them do if you try to mess with their bottom line, if you try to mess with their power. And so everything that I have now described to you is the new status quo. And that status quo will not disrupt itself. Now, it's very easy for us to get cynical, but cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. It's very easy for all of us to just kind of spiral down and to say, well, this thing's locked up. And I'm telling you, I'm talking to you from the bottom, the belly of the beast. So if you want to just go there, it's locked up, you're absolutely right about the level on which it's locked up. Nobody, kind of in a way, nobody knows that more than I do. But wasn't slavery all locked up? Wasn't the institutionalized oppression of women all locked up? Wasn't the Gilded Age and its treatment of workers all locked up? Wasn't segregation all locked up? Do what they did. Unlock it. We need to identify the problems in the past, but we also need to identify with the problem solvers. We have to toughen up, buttercups. We've got to rise to the occasion. Some things you do not because there's a guarantee of success. You do it because it's the right thing to do. You do it so that you can look at yourself in the mirror. You do it so that, in my case, you hear your father's voice. You let the bastards get to you, didn't you, little sister? Don't let the bastards get to you, my father used to say. I mean, every time I've heard somebody say about the whole political thing, oh, I just find it traumatizing. You think the people walking across the bridge at Selma were not traumatized? Do you know what those women went through who were thrown in prison for marching? What was their crime? They marched for suffrage because a woman had no power. Her husband could come home drunk way before AA. Her husband could come home, beat her, beat the kids. She had no recourse. She could leave, she could take everything that she had in her little suitcase, any money she brought in, perhaps if her family had money, it immediately became her husband's the moment they got married. She could leave, but she couldn't take the kids. So these are the kinds of things which were behind women wanting the right to vote. Maybe we can change things. That's where they were coming from. And so these women, because they marched for suffrage, were thrown into prison. And the conditions in the prison cell was so horrific that they went on a hunger strike. And the response of the prison officials was to send men into their cells and to force these metal contraptions on their necks to force feed them. Gee, girls, don't you think they knew some anxiety? I mean, who have we become? Well, you know, this is not a moment. This is not a moment for men to be boys. This is not a moment for women to be girls. You know, sometimes they say, you know, we all say there's something very tragic about it when a child never gets to experience childhood. But it's also pathetic when an adult never gets around to maturity that really defines adulthood. And this moment takes more than analysis. What more do we need to analyze? I'm going to talk to you about stuff tonight. I haven't told you anything yet that you don't already know. I'm not going to tell you anything tonight you don't already know. I might mention some statistics you're not totally clear about. None of this is anything we don't already know. This is not like 20 years ago. Gotta wake up and see what's happening. We all get it. This is not a moment where we need more analysis, and it's not a moment for more data collection, but it is a moment for courage. It's a moment not to learn more so that we'll know it. It's a moment to own what we know. And if this situation is going to be changed, if this current pattern of decline, not only in our democracy, but in our environment, in our food supply, in our economy, in our world relations, if that pattern of decline is going to be interrupted, it is going to be because we interrupted. And when Margaret Mead famously said that never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens could change the world, in fact, it's the only thing that ever has, I can tell you this. I come out of a pretty brutal year. You know, people have asked me, what did you learn? I said it last time, it's true this time. The system, and this is even more true, the system is even more corrupt than I knew. And some things about that you need to know. But the people of this country are even more wonderful than I had hoped. We are fine, thank you very much. It is simply time for us to stand up. Now, so let's analyze the situation and be clear about what it is. We understand already. It's that there was this economic paradigm. Some of us are older in the room. Some of us can remember. Some of us remember Ronald Reagan. And it was this idea of trickle-down economics, right? And so, first of all, I want to tell you something about before that. And for those of you who are younger here, some of you who are younger might not even believe me, even though intellectually you probably know it's true. But if you do not believe me, you'll see enough older people in the room going, So are you ready? I'm going to describe a land long ago and far away. It was called the 1970s. Okay? Youngins, listen to me. I want you to know this. We're the keepers of the story at a certain age, and we really need to know the story. In the 1970s, the average American couple could afford a house. The average American couple could afford a car. The average American couple could afford a yearly vacation. One salary could support a family of 4. One parent could stay home if they chose to be with the kids, and that American couple could send their kids to college. That was in the 1970s. You know what you call that? You call that a thriving middle class. Let's not kid ourselves. We don't have that now. And you cannot have a thriving democracy where you don't have a thriving middle class. Because starting back in the 80s with this great idea, some people would say, Marianne, it really started with the austerity of Jimmy Carter. I don't know. All I know, and let the historians figure that one out, but it certainly came on full bloom with Ronald Reagan. And the idea that the only responsibility of the corporation, now this is interesting, because we were talking about this. When free market capitalism was first originated in its articulation by Adam Smith, he said it cannot exist outside an ethical context. That's why even Milton Friedman, I already talked about Milton Friedman, even he said, well, the only way this can work is if we have a UBI. I mean, this is a really new aberrational thing. This idea of unfettered capitalism, this idea, you know, that when the young kids say late stage capitalism, they're not wrong here. Because this thing has become our new God. This thing is unfettered, soulless, completely divorced from any ethical. How are we even having the conversation every single day? This morning, did you read the one about the heart valve thing with the little umbrella that they put in people's heart? That's just the one today. Yesterday it was Boeing. The day before that it was East Palestine. It's like even some question whether or not people's lives should matter more than corporate profit. We're even having this conversation like it should be a question. Okay, so what happened is the idea that this fiduciary responsibility to stockholders. You know, some of us are old enough to remember a company, CEOs couldn't even be paid with stock options. I mean, this stuff is all, really, some of us remember before this, and that's why I think there's this interesting intergenerational thing now between old people and young people. You know, people ask me, who is your audience? I always say young people and old people, because those are the two who are guffawing on all this. Old people, because we know it didn't have to be this way. It wasn't this way when we were brought up, right? Okay, so what you had was this idea that all the money should be moved into the stockholders. The only responsibility was making the stockholders, and then the CEO rich too. But this was at the expense of the other stakeholders, at the expense of the workers, at the expense of the community, at the expense of safety, and on and on and on. And we were told, no, it's going to be great, see? Because these people are going to become rich, and it's going to be so good, because they're going to be job creators. They were job creators. Master, the job creators. And then they would throw down crumbs from their Mount Olympus of corporate power, and then it would lift all boats because the wealth, all that money would trickle down, and it would lift all boats. Well, except that it didn't. And it didn't. It threw millions of people off the boats they were already on, and it left millions of people in the water without even a life vest. And there's a reason for that. Because the business model was never job creation. The business model was job elimination. The business model was worker exploitation. The business model was union busting. The business model was slashing taxes for the very, very richest among us. And this has gone on for 50 years. And over that 50 years, $50 trillion of wealth has been transferred from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%. Now look, not every rich person is a greedy bastard. There are a lot of very wealthy people who might even be in this room who say, yep, it's true. It's not about personalities, it's not about people, it's about systems. So let's talk about where this has taken us to. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. Over 1 million Americans, 1.3 Americans, now ration their insulin. 18 million Americans cannot afford the prescriptions that their doctors give them. 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. 39% of Americans now report that they regularly skip meals in order to pay their rent. People are selling their blood plasma. Over millions, and now in the poorest neighborhoods in America, you're seeing the blood plasma centers pop up everywhere. And you know, giving your blood plasma, it's not like just giving blood after an accident, it's very uncomfortable. We have students who are in school living in their cars selling their blood plasma. We have one third of America's workers living on less than $15 an hour, half of them unable to find a place to live. Housing is not just a crisis, it's an emergency. You know, when the president said COVID was over, so the emergency is over. But you know, in sociology, there's this term, there's the screaming emergency, and there's the silent emergency. To everybody in this room, COVID was an emergency, and then the emergency was over. Millions of people were already living with the emergency of poverty, the emergency of hunger, the emergency of, listen, it's an emergency when you have to have 2 or 3 jobs. Both parents have 2 or 3 jobs. No one has the bandwidth anymore for each other, for their spouse, for their kids. No one's home. And we look at all this societal decline, and we like, what, wonder where it came from? We look at the mental health crisis as a symptom. We're not looking at the root cause. If you have 70% of Americans, which we do now, 70% of Americans who say that they live with chronic economic anxiety. 70% of Americans. Well, that's not surprising. The majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. The majority of Americans cannot absorb an unexpected $1,000 expenditure. How could there not be, quote unquote, a mental health crisis? But the traditional politicians don't want to discuss the root cause of the mental health crisis because of all the times they are the root cause of the mental health crisis. I remember when I was in Michigan, a senator saying to me, Ms. Williams, do you have any ideas what we should do about the mental health crisis? And I remember how I responded, yeah, stop driving everybody crazy. And we are what we are. You know, people, we were talking before about abusive relationships and how you wouldn't stand for abusive relationships. And I'm sure that there are people in this room who think, I'd never stand for an abusive relationship. What could be a more abusive relationship than yours with your government that gets your tax dollars and allows food companies to put carcinogens in the food that you feed your children? Tell me what could possibly be a more abusive relationship? So you say, okay, well, we just have to change our, elected representatives. And I think that would be a very, very good idea. But we see that the situation just gets deeper and deeper. In the farewell address of George Washington, he warned us against political parties. And he said that they could form factions of men who would be more loyal to their party than to their country. And John Adams then said he saw them as the greatest threat to democracy. So what's happened now is that there is a political media industrial complex. And they would have you think that the only people who should be considered to lead us are those, they would say, well, if you haven't had years of experience in the car that drove us into this ditch, why should we think you're the one to lead us out of the ditch? Their idea of qualified is qualified to perpetuate the system as it is. That's their idea of qualified. And they will do whatever it takes to make you think that it has to be one of them. Now, this is a very interesting thing also. Probably there are all kinds of books on American history in this store, and I think it would behoove all of us to read up. And if you read up on the Constitution, what did the founders say is the qualification for the presidency? Well, you have to have been born here. You have to have lived here for 14 years. You have to be 35 years old or older. It's very interesting. That's it. It does not say you have to have been a senator. It doesn't say you have to have been a governor or a lawyer or a congressman. Why? Because the founders were saying that every generation to decide for itself, what do you think are the skills and the expertise required in order to face the challenges of a particular time. Now, I'm not here asking you to nominate me for president because that's already locked up. Joe Biden has those delegates. Although I have some things to say tonight about how that goes down, simply because you should know. However, I am asking you to please, and I humbly request this, that you, those of you who have not yet voted, will consider voting for me on Tuesday. Not that I can become the nominee, but because with every vote I get to raise some eyebrows and inconvenience some people in this country who very much deserve to be inconvenienced. Franklin Roosevelt said that the main job of the presidency is not administrative. He said it's moral leadership. The problem is not that we need more political car mechanics in Washington. Washington has plenty of political car mechanics. The problem is we are on the wrong road. The problem is we have one major political party just racing towards the iceberg. We have another major political party heading there more slowly, and we're headed at a different angle. We need to turn this thing around. We need to turn this thing around. We need a generation that says we're taking the wheel. That is what needs to happen. But like I said, we're not going to take the wheel until first we deconstruct a lot of this in our hearts. So, what I believe we need is, as Eleanor Roosevelt, another great book, if they have it here in this bookstore, is a book by Doris Kearns Goodwin called No Ordinary Time. I see somebody nodding. I don't think I'm the only person here who's read it. It's an incredible book about Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt during the 30s and 40s. And she said to him, we need more than amelioration of stress. We need fundamental economic reform. So among the traditional, like corporate Democrats, for instance, they're there for, they want to ameliorate the stress. And they will take incremental approaches. But they won't go so far that in order to cross the next line, they would be challenging the underlying profit-making motive of their donor class. So the idea of actually turning things around would be represented by a very much a Franklin Roosevelt type Democratic Party, where the idea is that the purpose of the party and of all government policy is to serve people, to help people thrive. This is not free, this is your tax money we're talking about. And everything that I'm about to say to you, which I put in what I call an economic bill of rights, which was Franklin Roosevelt's phrase, I just want to point out before I do, because they would have you think this is just crazy left-wing thinking. This is all considered moderate positions in every other advanced democracy. You ready? Universal health care, Medicare for all. They'll tell you it's complicated. It's not complicated, it's just corrupt. There should be a complete cancellation of the college loan debts because it's obscene and immoral that they ever existed. Again, going back to those of us who are older, we remember before the 1970s, there was tuition-free college and tech school. University of Florida had a system, University of Texas, University of California. As a matter of fact, the fact that when Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, he said, well, that's ridiculous, and he got rid of it, is what made the Koch brothers go, ooh, he's our guy, we can use him, right? And also, I want to say something else, again, to those of you who are older in this room. I'm going to ask you, please, to do something. Remember who you were in your 20s. Just take a moment and remember who, see yourself in your inner eye as you were in your 20s. Could that person, could your nervous system at that time in your life have handled tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt? Would you be who you are today? Debt is crippling at any age. But these kids, and what do? Okay, so they're thinking that, so they're thinking, I don't want this monkey on my back, this burden, until I'm in my 50s or my 60s, because they don't know yet that it's like 5 seconds away to take it. And so then they say, all right, I'll go to work in some other business where I can make the money to pay off these debts quicker. And then they go, why did I get the degree then? There are tens of millions of them. And many believe that the president could just use the Higher Education Act and eliminate the whole thing. But like I said, the reason it should be eliminated is because of how immoral it is that this ever existed. This was another tentacle of that unfettered, soulless capitalism which sees its profit-gaining potential wherever there is human desperation. Wow, people really need that insulin. Go for it. Jack up the price. Wow, those people are really desperate for an education. Ooh, I bet we can get them on that. It is so immoral, right? Now, we also need a subsidized childcare. Once that people act like it's some big left-wing craziness. Left-wing craziness every other advanced democracy. We need to subsidize childcare. We need paid family leave. And universal, we need guaranteed sick pay. To even think about the fact that in every major city of the United States, a living wage is over $20 an hour, and our minimum wage is still $7.25. So we need guaranteed living wage, we need guaranteed jobs guaranteed, we need a Department of Peace. We have to stop, we have to It's called the Blob. I mean, in our own lifetime, we've seen it. We've seen it. Do you know how many Iraqis died in the Iraq War? I think we all need to revisit that. Anybody how many Iraqis died for this war that had no basis? It was an entirely false war. A million Iraqis died. And that last 20 years in Afghanistan, we need to play peace games just like we play war games. We need, just like we have a ministry, we have a whole military way of armies and armies with military personnel. We should have armies of peace builders. Right. We should be imagining a world without war in 100 years and reverse engineer from there. Now, some people say that that's naive. I think think what's naive is to assume that we'll necessarily be able to inhabit this planet for another 100 years if we don't at least try. Right? We have a military academy, we should have a peace academy. And this is a specific thing. Just like you treat sickness, but you also, we've learned now, you need to proactively cultivate health. You can't just not take care of your body, your exercise, your nutrition, and then when you get sick, just apply an allopathic remedy. What we do is we just cultivate all kinds of conditions that are almost inevitably guaranteed to burst into violence on some form, and we act as though the only thing we can possibly do is build more prisons or drop more bombs. Now there is a way to proactively create peace in the world, and there are 4 factors which statistically mean, if these factors are present, that there will be a higher incidence of peace and a lower incidence of violence. None of this is going to surprise you. It's common sense. Number 1, greater economic opportunities for women, greater educational opportunities for children, a reduction of violence against women, and an amelioration of unnecessary human despair. But we all know what's going on here. War makes money, and peace doesn't. And this is exactly what's happened. They say in this country, people say, this country needs to be run like a good business. No, it doesn't. It needs to be run like a fiduciarily responsible family. You set your kids up to win. You don't cut them off at their needs. Right now, in the modern era, I don't care if it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, those guys fall in line with big oil. We are continuing to ramp up rather than ramp down fossil fuel extraction. We have okayed the Willow Project, and we need to declare a climate emergency if necessary to make this happen. I'm going to ask you a question, and if the answer is yes, I'd like everybody to raise your hand very high. And then when you raise your hand very high, please keep it up because I want everybody in the room to have a chance to look around. Okay, you ready? If you are an older person who has ever heard these words uttered by a younger person, or if you are a younger person who has ever said these words, please raise your hand. And the words are, under normal circumstances, I think I'd be thinking about having children. But given the state of the world, I don't think it would be a morally responsible thing to do. Please raise your hand if you've heard those words or said those words. Please keep your hands up. And now I just want you all to look around the room. And now hear me, please. That is not normal. That's not normal. That's not normal. These are frogs in boiling water here. The species is shutting down. We need a Department of Youth, the children who are at risk in this country. We have children who are traumatized before preschool. I have met elementary school principals who tell me they have students on suicide watch. In public schools all over this country, they now have trauma rooms. Trauma rooms. I remember a few years ago, I thought, well, that's really great. Trauma-informed education and wraparound services and all this cool stuff everybody was talking about. Then it occurred to me one day, in other countries such as Portugal, we need to treat drug addiction like a health issue, not a criminal issue. I don't care what neighborhood you're in, and I'm sure this one. I mean, I've raised a child. I don't care what neighborhood you're in, and especially now with fentanyl, we all know the problem that we have in our midst. We absolutely must go in a different direction. And if we decriminalize on many of these other things, and in the drug war as we know it, we will have more of a bandwidth and more resources to focus on the one that truly is a terrible, terrible danger among us, and that is fentanyl. So I hope that what I've done tonight is to bring up things that I know are not comfortable, but the fact that they are not comfortable is almost why we need to discuss them. This issue in America of throwing a cheap yellow smiley face over everything. You know, the traditional politician doesn't want to disturb you, doesn't want to say anything negative. And this is part of what has just enabled us to kid ourselves, to just like, oh, well, they're handling it, somebody else is handling it. And we're 6 inches from the cliff. Now, when I wrote a book called Healing the Soul of America, I took a deeper dive into American history than I had done before. But more than that, I was very interested in what is the connection between spirituality and politics. I grew up in a generation, and there are others in this room who did. We would read Ram Dass and Alan Watts in the morning and go to Vietnam War protests in the afternoon. It was an entire cultural shift. Nobody had these lanes that you're supposed to stay in, right? It was cultural change, it was political change, it was sexual change, it was spiritual change, it was musical change. It was just change. And there wasn't the sense that you stay in your lane over there. But after the assassinations of the Kennedys and Dr. King, there was a split. I sometimes joke that the traditional political types took the East Coast and the more spiritual types took the West Coast. It wasn't exactly like that, but the split definitely began to exist. And now there's a sense of things coming back together. And when I began to study the roots of that and that connection between spirituality and politics, I realized there's no wheel we have to reinvent. Mahatma Gandhi said it all. That's what the philosophy of political nonviolence is. And then Dr. King went to India and he studied the principles of nonviolence and he brought them back to America for application to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And it's simply time for us to once again pick up the banner. And it says that we have to change on the inside in order to change on the outside. There has to be a characterological shift in all of us. Dr. King said we need external changes in our circumstances, but we also need internal shifts in our souls. As I mentioned earlier, you see the same smug, angry self-righteousness on the left is on the right. Enough with thinking that we know and other people don't know. Enough with thinking we're smarter and the people who disagree with us aren't as smart. Nobody has a monopoly on the truth. Everybody owns this country. And as Martin Luther King said, you have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. So we all have to become nonviolent practitioners in order to create the space of a new beginning. It will not be born from anger. It will not be born from separation. But it will be born from something new happening inside us. I met this gentleman over here earlier. He had said he is the deputy mayor in Ossining. This is the thing. We have to be as clear about what's happening in our own town and in our own communities and in our own states as we are clear about what's happening nationally. I said throughout the year that the traditional politician running for president would say, I want to go to Washington and fight for you. That is still not my idea of a good time. But I would say I want to go to Washington to co-create with you another chapter in American history. This is not going to be just one person you elect president. We made that mistake in our lifetime. It's not going to be we're going to elect the right president or even the right Senate or even the right House. No, it's going to be something different. We're going to have to rise up within ourselves. And for those of you who are young, this is probably not happy news, but it will be happy when you live it. It's probably going to be your lifetime. It's going to have to be a change that all of us make now, where becoming more active and more aware and refusing to shut down and refusing to distract ourselves simply becomes a layer of a well-lived, meaningful life. And that's why all of it matters now. Personal transformation matters and political transformation matters. It's a time of a big both and. And I began my career feeling, well, my greatest contribution I felt was in the area of personal transformation. And I landed in a place where, I thought, yeah, they're jerks sometimes. They're basically handling things. We know better now. We know better. So people would say to me when I began this, Marianne, how could you do this? Don't you understand a fascist is at the door? I've done this because a fascist is at the door. I agree with Franklin Roosevelt, who said that we would not have to worry in this country about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivers on its promises. Democracy is not delivered on its promises. And I'll tell you, for those of you who do not want Donald Trump in the White House again, and I'm definitely someone who does not want Donald Trump in the White House, the victory will be from someone who promises people what they deserve in this country, who promises people a chance to actually change and improve their material conditions. For those of you who are Democrats or Republicans who don't want Trump in office again, or independents who don't want him in office again, the danger is not people voting for Trump. The danger is people staying home. The danger is people, the votes being dispersed so much with the third parties. No. Somebody, and that's why I'm still doing this, somebody, just say it. Have the voice out there that you're gonna win by actually offering people a reason to go there. This could be we are watching a car crash in slow motion. This is not gonna be like 2020. You're not gonna win by scolding people. You're not gonna win by shaming people. You're not gonna win by warning people. We're gonna win by returning this government, returning the way we behave politically, returning our economics to righteousness, to an ethical center, to a moral center, by remembering that that's the point of all this. That's a big thing to have happen inside us. And when Mahatma Gandhi was asked, who is the leader of the Indian independence movement? He said, the small, still voice within. So I don't know what you are supposed to do. Like I said, I request that part of what you do is to vote for me on Tuesday. But everything else is not my job. God's not going to tell you what I should do. He's not going to tell you what I should do. But wherever you, however, whether secular, religious, spiritual, whatever, to listen, you know, my friend James Doty, he's a neurosurgeon at Stanford. And he said that they've discovered that there's more of a relationship in the body between the brain and the heart than they used to know. They used to think that the brain was the intelligence center of the body. They now realize it's a partnership between head and heart. And I think that's the intelligence center of a society, of a civilization as well. So check in with your heart before you move it into your head. Freud said intelligence will be used in the service of the neurosis. So however you do it, prepare your nervous system for this time. Get clear within yourself. Get over yourself. We need to stop asking each other, are you okay? What trauma are you dealing with today? Instead, we need to look at each other and say, what great thing are you doing today and how can I help? Those are the kinds of shifts that need to happen in us and then they will happen in our society. So I'll just share with you the one that works for me. Maybe it'll have some value for you, whether you apply religious, spiritual, secular, whatever, but it does work for me. And I try to remember it. Pray in the morning and kick ass in the afternoon.
Yes. Question?
Okay, who has,
We have a mic here.
I got one. I have Mike over here.
Okay, I'm listening
Wonderful,
to you.
wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you.
If things go well, however you see that happening in this world of ours, in the United States, and they go better than they go well, how would you see us being in November? If they go well, from your point of view, you see the macro, you're in the game. We're watching the game, we think, we're probably missing some things along the way, but if things go well, how would you see them being? And we got to be a part of that, obviously.
Direction of greater democracy, greater justice, regeneration and revitalization, or it's going to blow in the direction of chaos and authoritarianism.
Yep.
How it goes well, what it looks like is that sense of we opened up a space, we opened up a space, we opened up a space. What that looks like electorally, I don't know any more than anyone else does, and it's a deep conundrum. And I don't claim to have any, in terms of what that should look like, voting and so forth, I'm in the same inquiry that everybody is in. We all have a lot to think about. So I don't know what it looks like, but I know what it feels like. We have a possibility, we have a possibility. Because this is the thing, it can't just be, if we beat Trump, then everything's okay.
Right.
We thought that in 2020. We realized something was already out of the bag. Now it's Trumpism. Even if Trump were out of the scene, something has happened. So we have to dissolve, I mean, it's a bigger task. So that's why that has to be factored in. That's what I know, that we will feel, Winston Churchill said, you can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they have exhausted every other. And if you look at us historically, we're often late to get there. And we're late now. This should never have gotten this bad. It should never have gotten this bad. And there are all kinds of things we have to look at, including in ourselves, I guess, and how it did get this bad. It's the 11th hour, but it's not midnight yet. And historically, even though we were often late, once Americans get there, we slam it like nobody's business. And I feel that moment of possibility. I want to remind everyone, there were Trump people, a lot of Trump people, on that UAW picket line. Josh Hawley, who is a very conservative senator, has called for the repeal of Citizens United. And just the other day, I saw that Sheldon Whitehouse is joined by J.D. Vance in these corporate tax cuts in terms of mergers. This is a moment of possibility because people on the right as well as the left have begun to figure it out. Oh, it's not left versus right. It's powerful versus powerless. It's not left versus right. It's those who have capital and ever greater opportunity to create more capital versus those who are just struggling to get by. So I think the anti-corporate message, say it loud and say it proud, there are people on the right as well as the left who've got it. There are people, you have a majority of them on MSNBC and did not want my voice out there. Not because they really thought I'm an unserious candidate, it's because they realize how serious I am. And this message, this blows up the game and the American people are there. And either a wall's gonna crash. And it's our responsibility to have it blow in the right direction. What that means specifically for any of us, it's not for me to know. Like I said, I live with the same question that you do.
Great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Young people from every background. Trump now has 50% Latino support. The rise in the black vote. So for you to kind of, it just seems so variant from where you were coming from, which seemed to be so balanced, holistic, and all of a sudden, Trump. So I know sounds like you kind of dialed that back, but I would just say, where do you see the threat in terms of from the Democrat? I mean, you didn't even mention Biden. Biden's destroying this country at every single turn. I always tell people, Trump's not the problem, he's a symptom of the problem.
Well,
I just want to know if you want to kind of clarify that, or what you think.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you, he is a symptom of the problem. I certainly agree with that. And not everybody in this room, including myself, by the way, would agree with you that Biden is so terrible. The reason I didn't mention Biden is because I see Biden as a symptom, just like I see Trump as a symptom. But when you ask me where is the line, fascism. It's a line. Sometimes love says no. I'm sorry if anything I said, it sounded like should. I say to those of you who are Democrats who do not want to see him again in the White House, if you are independents or Republicans who do not. Listen, this is America. If you feel moved to vote for Trump, and that's what all of us, remember what I said earlier, nobody gets to own America, we all own America. And I think we need to remember that about Trump voters. They have a right to vote for Trump. And I want to tell you something, since all this started with Trump, 2 women in my life, one a very close girlfriend, and one a very close professional associate, but who I think of as a real deep friend at this point. They are Trump voters. And I feel blessed that they've been in my life because there's a certain kind of something I could be privy to or vulnerable to in terms of stereotypes that, I've never been able to go into because of them being in my life. So if I said anything that sounded other than that, but I don't think I did because I said for those of you who don't wish. Listen, I've been running for the Democratic nomination. So by definition, I was running to be the one who would take on Trump. He has his nicknames. I have my nickname for him. Donald, darling. So, are we cool? I do not see him. People say something about his lack of political experience. This is just my opinion. I don't think the problem is his lack of political experience. I think it's his lack of ethics, his lack of character. That's what it was. If he had wanted to come in there and brought in very intelligent well-meaning conservatives who were serving Congress, he could have. He chose not to, and he has made it clear. If he gets in again, if everybody's going to be a Sebastian Gorka or a Stephen Miller. Maybe you don't agree with me, sir, but I bet some people in this room do. That fact alone is enough for us to do everything possible to make sure it doesn't happen. It's simply our opinion. And I love everybody. Well, that's your opinion, honey. It's an American. No, I wouldn't say that about Biden, and I never have. No, I don't feel that way about Biden. I feel about Biden what I said earlier about the corporatist Democrat. These incremental steps. And also, I do have some problems, although we're in a different place now because he's the nominee. So, you know, like when the president tweeted yesterday, of course he didn't tweet, whoever he had tweeted though, says to us, healthcare is a right and not a privilege. Really? Really? With 75 to 90 million people who are uninsured or underinsured. The Willow Project, the fact that yes, there have been some healthy investments in green energy in the Inflation Reduction Act on one hand, on the other hand, more oil drilling permits given than even Trump did. So I've certainly had my disagreements, but no, I don't think, to me actually, me personally, this is just my opinion on that. I do not believe he is. I do not agree with your assessment of him, and that's all. Yeah.
There's a question up front.
Oh, hi. Christina from the Ossining LGBTQ Alliance. And I do want to say thank you for all the work you've done for the LGBTQ plus community, going back to AIDS in the 80s, and it really means a lot. We're seeing villainization of queer people around this country, especially from the evangelical right. What do you see happening with the growth of the power of evangelical Christians sort of taking over the Republican Party and also literally villainizing and leading to the death of queer people, especially trans youth? And what's your plans on
First thing, if I were president, one of the first things I would do is confer special protection status on trans Americans because they are targeted. But I want to point out, this is what I meant about not teaching your children the Declaration of Independence. If children don't learn the Declaration of Independence and they don't learn the Bill of Rights, then how do you expect them to be horrified when those principles are under attack when they're an adult? All men are created equal. All men inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This should be so embedded in our consciousness as children that the idea of any American having fewer rights would be like, oh no, we don't do that here. That's the danger in America. That too many Americans don't get that, no, that's not supposed to happen here. Are you with me? So that's number one. Number two, when you see certain things like this happening, when you said the business about evangelical Christians, there are some evangelical Christians, there's a new generation of evangelical Christians, and I think we should be really careful on that. There are some evangelical Christians very involved in the environmental movement and so forth. I know evangelical Christians who would not wish to deny right. I think that they have been useful to the people we most need to be concerned about. Do you know what I'm saying? They're Americans, they get to have their view. What that John Adams said we needed to revisit, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Many different people, different religions, agnostic, atheist, black, white, brown, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, whatever, but united by our fealty to certain common principles. We need to remember what this is about. And if you have enough people in a country who get, oh no, in America everybody's supposed to be treated the same, then these problems don't come up like this. Does that make sense? In the meantime, you need a president who definitely stands on the fact that on my watch these things will not occur. Does that make sense? And that one, I think, is for many of us it's such a, sometimes in the life of a nation, like in the life of an individual, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's really shocking. I mean, we thought that with, especially after the AIDS crisis and then the human rights, so much, we thought we were making progress. And then we're moving back. After Roe v. Wade was repealed in the Dobbs decision, let's not forget what Clarence Thomas said. Because these people telegraph. These people telegraph, just like Trump is telegraphing. And Clarence Thomas said, he put it out there not long after the Dobbs decision, he said, I don't really think that the marriage equality decision was well decided. That's what I mean, everyone, don't go to sleep. I remember reading about what happens when people freeze to death in an avalanche. And what happens apparently when you freeze to death is you fall asleep. So I was reading this story about these people, and one person got to fall asleep, and the person who was doing, don't go to sleep, wouldn't let you go to sleep. And that's how we have to be with each other. You can't, just don't go to sleep. If we're awake, we'll be fine. What we have to avoid is the temptation to go to sleep, which means, among other things, put the phone down. We're all addicted, right? To really understand all the ways that we're allowing our attention to be just sucked out of our life. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. I'm looking for some guidance. I grew up I'm a military, youngest of 7, father 30-year Marine.
Wow. And it's very dangerous what your son is going through, because these kids are starting to spiral down. These kids are, and a lot of us who are older have an institutional memory of a time when, yeah, we went down, but we got back up. And we also, and I say this as a lifelong Democrat, we have a memory of a time when, yeah, the Democrats will come through. These kids are living in a generation, neither major party has ever come through for them. Not in their experience. And so I believe what we need to do is be involved. You know what they say in AA, get into the solution. You just get sick and tired of being sick and tired, get into the solution. We have to demonstrate for young people. Where should he get his hope from? Look at all of the young people who are having to go home and live in the basement with their parents, which is not only at the time when they should be out there starting their lives. Economically, they're having to live with their parents, which is not only a problem for the young people, it's a problem for the parents. These people say to me, this was my retirement money. I didn't expect to be having to support my kids at this point. So it's an economic crisis. These things are just multiplied. These kids don't have universal health care, and they look at the kids in other countries, and they say, why do they have it? They don't have access to college education. Other kids do. They don't know housing. They don't know how to get in the game. One older person said to me one day, Ms. Williamson, the problem with the younger generation today is that they don't have enough respect for capitalism. I said to him, well, maybe if they had some capital. I think we need to see this as the crisis that it is, and many parents know that you're not alone. Know that you're not alone, but the best thing that our young people can see is that we're all working on it. And ultimately, he's going to have to see as a 22-year-old, he has to be working on it too. It's like I said earlier tonight, I'm talking to you whether you're 18 or 80. And in the meantime, though, I think that all of us in this room, hopefully can be moved by your sharing to realize you're probably not the only parent in this room who's concerned about this kind of, in anyone's life at any time, the 20s are hard. That's true. And that's important too. It's not a mental illness, it's the 20s. But there are social and economic conditions today which you can see they're not inspired. They're not inspired, and this is dangerous for the history of our country. You can't have. And I'm sure if you have a spiritual life, a religious life, and that other part of my brain, that other part of my life, I would have more to say about that. And you practice, you go deep within yourself, He's 22 years old. You can't treat him like a little boy. So you have to treat him as a man with great respect for his decisions and pray in your own way for guidance of how you can be the mother that would be most helpful, which isn't coddling him, right? Not treating him like a little boy, treating him like a man, and also demonstrating to him that you're part of a solution in the larger society. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you. And I remember thinking to myself, if I was president, I would say, I'm meeting with Jewish American leaders this morning. This afternoon, I will be meeting with Arab American leaders, Israeli Palestinian leaders. When our Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, I don't think that means just Americans. And I think America's highest alliance should be with humanity itself. And I believe that we should, in our policies, and once again, Bill Clinton tried, but too many Americans, even Barack Obama, he went to Tel Aviv University. It was clear he knew what the scoop was, but he wouldn't spend any political capital on it. So much more should have been said much sooner, because anybody with any understanding of how life operates knew that that was a situation somehow, somewhere was going to blow. And now I believe that we should demonstrate in our policies equal commitment to the safety and the security and the sovereignty of both peoples. We need, obviously, it is very concerning right now, this idea of an invasion of Rafah, this idea of potential starvation of 1 million people. I don't even understand at this point why it is that Biden is so incapable of saying no to Netanyahu. At this point, he knows it's hurting him politically. When you have, AIPAC no differently than the insurance lobby, no differently than the big oil lobby, no different than big food lobby, no different than defense contractors lobby. So we need, obviously, a ceasefire.
But you said you can vote on Tuesday.
Yeah, isn't your primary on Tuesday?
Yes.
Is that just here?
Early voting.
Is this
Early
across-
voting and-
Well, there's early voting now,
Yeah.
Okay.
and you're voting on Tuesday.
Okay.
Yes,
Right?
right.
So you
Voting
have
tomorrow.
already- How many of you have already voted?
Tomorrow at the Ossining Community Center is early voting right here.
Okay.
Right around the corner.
So this might be a silly question, but if Biden is already the nominee for the Democratic Party, how can we vote for you and how can?
Because I'm on the ballot. Look at it. If any of you have donated to my campaign, you bought that ballot. People say, why is she still out there? Because we bought those ballots.
The second part of the question, thank you so much, is
I have people that believe in you.
Yes.
However, they are terrified of Donald Trump becoming president. So I know this has kind of already been addressed, but I really would ask for maybe some insight in how to handle or how to navigate or even how to really believe that it's possible to vote for you without taking away important votes from
Okay.
people. You know, I get it all
No,
the
I
time.
understand.
So I'm,
Okay.
thank you.
There are a lot of people who apparently missed the 7th grade. It's basic civics. This is a primary. This is a primary. This is a primary. Once again, to the older people in the room, we had an incumbent president named Lyndon Johnson. Eugene McCarthy primaried him. Bobby Kennedy Sr. primaried him. Nobody thought it was weird. We called it democracy. This is a total DNC concocted narrative. Oh no, we already have an incumbent, and when there's an incumbent, there's no primary challenger. That's just this, they used to say that Republicans fell in line and Democrats fell in love. Today, it's completely the opposite. It has to be Joe. It has to be Joe. It has to be Joe. The DNC says it has to be Joe. The DNC says we have an incumbent. No. There's no special assignation for incumbency in the U.S. Constitution. People primary incumbent senators, congresspeople, and presidents. So you can't be a spoiler if you're in the primary. Now at this point, even more so, he's already won the delegates. He is the nominee. So a vote for me, by definition, can't change, it just means you're dedicated to democracy. That the idea of all people, I believe, and I'm not a victim here, I'm a big girl, I have a life, I'll be fine, but you need to know this. Democracy is about the fact that everybody should have exposure to all the candidates. You should decide, you should know who the candidates are.
For a while, the one thing I feel like I would love to presence is the marginalized people, for example, indigenous people, agriculture people, immigrant people that kind of look like me. And I would love to just hear a little more about that because I think there's a big base that your message has such power and to really, I think, change things in a way. And that there's a base there that you can reach out, and I'd love to know how to reach that out to folks through your message.
So this is how it works. If you are on CNN, first of all, if you're a Democrat running for president and you're not on CNN, or you're not on MSNBC, people don't even know you're running. And if they say long shot before your name every time you're mentioned, and also this year I became a self-help author. Isn't that interesting? Any little way to demean, any little way to diminish. And so the reason that's so important is because when people don't know you're out there, you don't have a fundraising base. Okay? People think you're not a serious candidate. So what does that say? You're in a situation, getting on these ballots, and once again, this is one of those things which all of us need to understand. The situation is rigged in such a way that nobody really can get anywhere near the pinnacles of power in this country unless they have access to huge amounts of money. I'm sure you all read about the $25 million fundraiser last night in New York City. Right, that's what this thing is about. If you don't have the money, if you're in a campaign like mine, New York is a perfect example. I'm on your ballot, but I didn't have a campaign here. I didn't have the money to have offices. I should have campaign offices, a New York staff. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get on the ballots. So you're talking about many demographics where I had limited capacity to reach out. What does that mean? It's very practical. It's like you would have a liaison for Indigenous affairs, right? You would have a liaison for the different types of people and people who would be working, that would be on staff. They would be making contacts. So as it is, we did the best that we could in the hopes that people, certainly, if you look at Marianne2024.com and you look at the issues pages, I have whether it's immigration, whether it's indigenous peoples. What was the third group you mentioned?
Agriculture workers. Oh,
agriculture. I have much that I've talked about with agriculture, big ag, what it's done to farming, monocropping, all of that. And if you look at the issues, but see, that's again, when you say where does all that money go, where it's interesting because the strategy now. Well, what they'll do is a lot of ads, etc. But on a regular campaign, that's what's called field, where there would be people on staff who would be taking all those positions, making contact with all the people who run the organizations and so forth. But to be honest, even to the extent to which I did, the character assassination, the diminishment, the invisibilization, the erasure, and to be honest, the unbelievable hypocrisy of many people in the progressive movement was such that I couldn't even get meetings with people that I was kind of shocked I couldn't get meetings with.
What message?
I went down to Eagle Pass, Texas, by the way, and I had an incredible experience there. Yeah. And the whole election, that's like tiny. But if you have in November a closed election, that means something. And I'm hoping to have enough by the time I'm done. After this trip, I will get over to Oregon and to New Mexico. The goal here is just that there would be enough reason that some people would think maybe we better consider the popularity of what this woman is saying. Maybe she's right. Maybe she won't stop about Medicare for all. What is she talking about that people are responding to? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for you until Tuesday, it's the same thing. People that you know, forwarding my tweets, etc. and helping make it happen. Does that make sense? Thank you. Yes, ma'am. The one state, you know what was weird? There's only one state where I got up to 9.1%. You know what state that was? Oklahoma. Yes. Yeah.
I noticed before you said something along the lines of, people don't remember civics that they learned in 7th grade, and I just wanted to say, people don't really learn civics in 7th grade or in any grade anymore. I think there's
11 states, and this to me is a crisis. It's the American educational system, and not teachers, by the way. I don't blame teachers for this. The 11 states do not even require half a year of American history, American government, and civics. If I were president, one of the first things I'd do is have a big conclave of American history teachers. Any high school or junior high school American history teachers in the room? If you meet one, really?
That's what I went to school for, but I had to leave because it's.
That's right.
It's like
We're leading teachers. Do you want to say anything about that?
I could talk forever. I'm sure anybody else could
If
talk
you were a
forever.
teacher who found it too hard for various reasons to remain in the profession?
Yeah, I'm still an educator, just not in a public. I'm sorry. I'm still an educator, but just not in a public school setting because it's just impossible to actually teach anything at meeting.
That's what I hear all the time. This is not what I was educated for. This is about behavioral problems. This is about crowd control. It's about control by. Well, thank you for trying. So yes, in fact, I bet in this. I know this sounds so silly. I picked up a book once. It was American History for Dummies. A long time ago, and I was like, I couldn't believe. We all need to freshen up on some of this stuff. And one of the reasons I think it's so important also is because there are some people in this country who only want to talk about what America has done right. And they whitewash everything, and they don't want to look at any of the shadows that we have to look at. But there are also people in this country. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry, where are we? Oh, yes.
On that vein, so like I said, I'm still working in education, and I was wondering what you would like to see on different levels, systematic and individual. What we can be trying to do in order to build resilience with the kids
Okay,
that are coming up now for the long fight ahead.
Well, first of all, this is really interesting that everybody's so into this word resilient today. It's like when I was talking about trauma-informed education. Why should people have to be so resilient? What is going on in this country that everybody has to learn resilience? It should be a country where having to be resilient all the time isn't the issue. Now, I personally believe, obviously, we have a multidimensional breakdown. We have an all-systems breakdown. It's going to take an all-systems approach. There is no one thing. But I believe that the common factor of economic injustice cannot be overstated. A lot of these traumatized kids come from traumatized households, come from a lot of the dysfunctions and malfunctions that arise from an economically tense or anxious family. So these children, when you have a healthy family system, the kid doesn't need as much resilience. The system absorbs, and that's what healthy parenting is. But we have to understand how many couples you have, both members of the couple have to work 2 or 3 jobs. I mean, this is the reality in far too many people's lives in America today, and these children are just. So build resilience, make it easy. My first answer would make it easier for their parents to have time with them, and healthy food, and health care, and knowing that they'll have education and safe neighborhoods. Just everything is so out of whack because we've allowed this behemoth of corporate power to truly, it is a system of economic tyranny. And I'm not a crazy left-winger, this would be considered moderate. If I was talking to any European nation, I'd be considered a moderate. Does that make sense? What my plan is. And my plan is articulated at Marianne2024.com on the issues section. So my plan is for a council of black elders. Although it's not really black elders because it's intergenerational, because the money would be dispersed over a period of 20 years. And you would have black leaders from all sectors. It would be from politics, from business, culture, art, real estate, because real estate would be an important issue actually. The money that I put down as the starting point to discuss is $1 trillion, okay? To be dispersed over 20 years. I think that if I owe you money, I don't get to tell you how to spend it. So I don't think white people should be telling black people how to spend the money. I don't think white people should be making that decision. So my idea is that there would be two main categories. That the money is to be spent on items of either educational or economic renewal. And within that, it would be up to this council of black leaders. Once again, intergenerational, both those who've been around and also those who are very young because the money would be over 20 years. Now, many people, I just want to tell you right now, many people have a problem with what I just said because it is true that if you look at the 4 to 5 million formerly enslaved people that historians believe were released at the end of the Civil War, the promise was for 40 acres and a mule for every family of 4 formerly enslaved. If that were given today, it would be trillions of dollars. But, you know, I once read a book that said, with your vision, you must never compromise. Politics is the art of compromise. I believe if I were president, you know, because presidents should lead, I believe it's possible that the right president could get enough buy-in from the American people to have a conversation starting with $1 trillion, which is a lot of money and would become a whole lot more invested well over a 20-year period, by the way. Whereas if you came in with something like $5 trillion, I just can't even imagine any House or Senate leader who would even allow it to come to the floor. So that's where I'm coming from.
Do you feel that this would truly heal the race?
No, would it truly heal? No, look. Germany, after World War II, Germany gave $89 billion to a Jewish organization. Does it mean the Holocaust didn't happen? Of course not. But I think it has gone far towards psychological and emotional reconciliation with the Jews of Eastern Europe, so that it wasn't just remunerative. And that's what I think. I think reparations would be about more than the money. It would be about a generation saying in full, fundamentally, we recognize a debt that is owed. And we as a generation are willing to pay it. I think that if Martin Luther King had not died, if either Lyndon Johnson had been president again, or even Humphrey, you know, they'd done the Voting Rights Act, which has been gutted by John Roberts' court. They did the Civil Rights Act, and I think the next thing that would have gotten to this. Now, Nixon got in. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who wasn't he a senator from New York after that? At that time, he was a domestic advisor to Nixon. And his advice to Nixon, he said, there's been enough drama around race. I recommend what he called it was a policy of benign neglect. So all of the momentum of the civil rights movement stuff by striking down Martin Luther King particularly. And I just think it's the next step for us to take. And people say, oh, it's so much money, $1 trillion. Right now, I remind you, we spend almost that in 1 year on our defense budget, where it's not even just the obscenity of the money, it's that we're not even spending it on things that would actually help us in a 21st century war. Right? So, and by the way, I saw they're talking already about 1.5 trillion for next year. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. You've been coming into my morning box for many, many years, so to hear your articulation on so many issues, I'm really grateful. It just feels like the conversations we need to be having on kind of every level. So many years ago, I sent my son, I related to your conversation very much, Marianne. Mom, don't send me this Marianne stuff. About a month ago, he goes, hey Mom, you know, there's this really cool person. So at some point, and you know, he is also as frozen as your son. So, thank you. We
Thank
all
you.
need
So
to
when
be
he
those.
said that, was he saying it from the political? Because a lot of times the
No,
parents.
no.
Oh, he was saying
Political.
it from the spiritual.
No, both.
Oh, that's really nice.
So heart math, I know you know about
Yeah,
heart
very
math.
much.
I taught him that, so thank you.
Yeah, thank
Anyway.
you. I see that with parents, and then they argue, oh, but no, that's not the same Marianne. I've been telling you for years, no, she's another person. Yeah. Thank you. It's both and. It's both and is what Martin Luther King said. You know what Martin Luther King also said? He said, the desegregation of the American South is the political externalization of the goal of the civil rights movement. But the ultimate goal is the establishment of the beloved community. That's basic to nonviolence. It's both and. It's purifying ourselves and purifying. There's a lot to do. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Marianne, for giving me and the rest of us the opportunity to be together, because sometimes we can feel alone, and it's really wonderful to be together with you all, and you enabled this, so thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say one thing to that. First of all, I assure you, you're not alone. And I was already telling you about my experiences around the country, but more than that, I believe with all my heart there is a critical mass of Americans that if somebody had the right campaign and was the right person and had the right money, could be harnessed. And it is my sadness I was not successful at that. But I think the American people, don't lose your faith in the American people. Know that there are people who are just as concerned as you, by the way, on the right as well as the left, right? Yeah. And we all need to cultivate more gatherings, or we're just going to get together. Yes, ma'am.
And I just wanted to mention that New Yorkers, we had 10 days of early voting. It started last Saturday. You can vote tomorrow and Sunday at your early voting locations in your county. You cannot vote on Monday, but Tuesday at your regular polling place.
Really? That's interesting. Not on Monday, huh?
No, the day before the election, they need time to set up the machines and everything. So.
And tell your friends.
Just had a quick thing.
Listen, nothing, I think young people need to be reminded. These things, they take time. You know, you don't get what you want in one election season. But that is also coupled with the fact that this is an urgent moment. This is an urgent moment. Okay, who's next?
Just really quickly. One of the things in your last previous remarks, Marianne, was that, where you are in your campaign right now, and just how important it is, not only how important the people are behind you, and meaning that there's this force multiplier that is happening with every place that you are going, all the hearts that you are touching. It's just building, this momentum just keeps going and going and going. And this room full of people, there's so much potential to multiply this force through, and I dare to say, as Marianne had said earlier, forwarding her social media messages. There are opportunities also, certainly there are donations, funding is extremely important, but there's also the people power, and I hope you don't mind me saying, like I'm a volunteer and other people, we need you, and
take a donation envelope as you leave and put in $5.
Exactly. So I don't know, I just wanted to say that, just encourage you to come along.
Yeah, I mean, if this were, what happened was people who are political junkies are thinking about this all the time, but most Americans don't start thinking about this stuff till right before an election. And so there was it has to be Biden, it has to be Biden, it has to be Biden, and I see you and I'm going to mention it, I promise. It has to be Biden, it has to be Biden, that it took time before, like now it is Biden, and people are like, wait, maybe we should talk about this.
People don't understand, so so the Equal Rights Amendment for the federal government was, January 27th of 2020, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. We added the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. Women are equal citizens under our U.S. Constitution today. But Trump was in office and he derailed the publication of an updated Constitution. When Biden got into office, the expectation was that he would have the Equal Rights Amendment published. He has not. The reason we are getting all of this rollback of civil rights in the court system is because the courts are saying, hey, we've got the old Constitution, and in the old Constitution, it was written by and for men, it was amended by and for men, and women are not equal. But with publication, the courts have a new Constitution in their hands which says we're equal citizens. Marianne Williamson has been fabulous. I've been following her around. But she has said that on her first day in office, and I believe her, on her first day in office, she will make the phone call to the federal archivist, and we will have our Constitution published with the 28th Amendment, which says the government cannot discriminate based on sex.
I would take every opportunity possible to make sure that everybody was clear. There's a mother in the White House, and you can take that whoever you want. Does anybody else have anything to say, or to ask, or to bring up? Anybody over here? You've all been very patient. Okay, a couple of more. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, and thank you for taking. I have a question about universal health care or Medicare for all. Would that include things like that are not currently covered, like medicines that really work, like nutrition?
Yes, yes. I want to brag for a minute. I'm very excited about this. I want you to go to go to Marianne2024.com, look at issues, and look at my whole health plan. So this is the deal. We now call it Improved Medicare for All, so that it includes eyeglasses, hearing aids, and dental and mental health. But I also said before, we have to do more than just provide a way to treat sickness. And you might have heard me say on debate last time when we had debates, that we didn't have a healthcare system and a sickness care system. We have the highest rate of chronic illness of any advanced democracy. A lot of this has to do with the carcinogens in our food, for instance. You probably read the viral article about the ketchup bottle in the United States versus a ketchup bottle in Canada. All the ingredients that are not allowed in other countries, etc. But this is what we have in my whole health plan, because it is as geared towards creating a healthier society as it is geared towards treating sickness. This is the deal. You go to the doctor. Most doctors in the United States have received a Western medical education, which tends to be primarily focused on pharmaceutically based allopathic remedies. Under my plan, it becomes mandated by law. There is a universal database. Whatever condition or sickness that the doctor diagnoses, and whatever the prescription that doctor might give you in terms of pharmaceutical allopathic remedy, all of which is now covered because we have Medicare for all, it is mandated that you will be shown this database. Whatever that sickness or condition is, if there is a non-pharmaceutical, non-allopathic remedy that has been proven to be anywhere near as efficacious, it is legally mandated that you are told about it, and your insurance will cover that as well. I think this is good. I do think there should be greater justice, and like on Thursdays, I've got from 2 to 4, here's my cell number. I could probably do 2:30 to 3 in there on Thursdays. We won't make it. We won't make it. So we have to become as convicted behind our dedication to know that this is not nothing. This is serious here. I am so aware. Every time I get on a stage like this, there are countries, there are many countries, particularly as a woman. If I got up here in front of you and said a fraction of the criticism of my government that I have, I would be hauled off imprisoned possibly, and worse possibly. This is serious. But if we awaken, so you say, none of us can know, but all of us can hold the election itself in a deeper place. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I remember the author Paul Hawkins saying, we're living at a time of blessed unrest. It's okay that we don't have all the answers. For me, because I am a woman of faith, you know, there's a prayerfulness involved there. We will pull off the same kind of political miracle that the abolitionists did, the same kind of political miracles that the women suffragists did, the same kind of political miracles that the labor organizers did, and the same kind of political miracles that the civil rights workers did. I also want to make one plug beyond that. This idea of thinking religion and spirituality has nothing to do with social justice flies in the face of American history. That's why it is so important that we stand on the idea that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We ourselves must be, however, the benders of the arc. And I can say here tonight, and I've said this before tonight, I want you to know, and I hope you feel this way about each other. This is it. Just people coming together in a very adult way, thinking about these things. That level of thinking precedes right action. That's Buddhist, that's Gandhi. It's very serious philosophical perspective. Go deep enough into the vertical, you'll know what to do in the horizontal. Clarify your heart, clarify your thinking, and you will kick ass like a real American. Thank you very much.
Tonight, the store is open, so Marianne's books are for sale at the front counter. I'm sure she'll sign them if you ask.